Good evening, members of the task force and members of the public. Before we begin, I have a note to announce that came to light here this afternoon. It was brought to our attention that our former auditor, Paula Fike, passed, and it was her funeral today. And I wanted to publicly acknowledge to the Fike family our condolences from the commission. Paula served as an auditor for several years, taking over after she had been a deputy auditor for Helen Nelson for quite some time. And Paula went through a lot of growth with our commission, and she was our auditor when we built this new addition. So I just wanted to express our condolences to the Fike family and say that we have many fond memories of Paula, and she was a great public servant. So I hope you can remember them in your prayers, maybe. So we have any comments from you, Commissioner, before we begin? I got a question I'm going to lay on all our people right away, but I'll give you a chance.
No, thank you for those words of support and condolence for the Fite family. And it's good that you said that, because it's important to recognize their family and the contribution she made to the county. And I guess with that, let's just get to it. She'd probably want us to just get down to business tonight.
Well, if you knew Paula, she was she followed Helen Nelson. There wasn't much slack in the chain, I mean, at all. And I learned that the hard way. Last week, we spent a couple of hours going around and crawling around the old building. And I'm going to have a question to ask that you're going to answer, and that is your observation. But before we get to that, we've got some people that may want to testify, because tonight it is for a hearing for individuals to come and express their opinion, their likes, dislikes, their ideas about what we should do with the old courthouse. So the mic is open, so whoever wants to come up and make a public comment on their feelings about what we should do as a commission with that building, step forward.
Well, not everybody at once.
Okay,
I got a question for you, Jim.
yeah,
Can they come up afterwards to hear what you guys thought of the building?
oh, sure,
Because I was the only one
Okay.
off the committee that got to tour, so.
okay.
Yeah,
That's,
I don't think there'd be any problem with having this be free-flowing.
No.
Back and forth.
no, we can, this is free flowing. You guys, this is pretty open. Where, you know. Okay, so we're going to start with who wants to volunteer from the group that toured the building last week. I'd like to hear your observations of what you learned. And when you started, you had an opinion, or maybe you thought you knew, but after you got a chance to walk through for a couple of hours, well, what did you find out? So who wants to be first?
Scott Montgomery.
That does surprise me at all.
I guess the thing that shocked me, it's been many years since I've been in that courthouse, and I'd forgotten, I imagine it was much bigger than what I found out when I walked through there. I remember walking into the treasurer's office, and it seemed way smaller now than it did 20 years ago. I was very impressed at the condition the building's in for the most part. I guess the thing that disturbed me was this report was done in 2020, and I don't see that much of that maintenance was ever done. The external part of the building, I think there was quoted about $375,000 to do the outside maintenance work, and I couldn't see that any of that's been done from what I saw compared to what was in that report. And that concerns me a little bit. I don't know why we did this study and report on what to do it and then just ignored it. So that's my take on it. Thank you.
Anybody else? Doug, you had the flashlight. Doug, you were walking around. Your dad worked in the building, so what'd you
Yeah.
think?
Well, the building is in very good shape for how old it is. And what this assessment was, it's mostly maintenance. That's what it needs is maintenance. And none of it's been done in 5 years. And they say the stucco is loose. Well, stucco can be fixed. It can be caulked, it can be tuck pointed. And you say there's dry rot up in the attic. Well, there's one member in the valley that's shot, but that can be replaced. And that's no big deal. I mean, everything is solid. I've been in a lot worse buildings than this, and they're standing yet. I mean, I don't know how you could ever knock it down.
Liz?
An impression more from driving into town today was seeing the clock tower as part of the skyline and realizing that if that wasn't there, it would change the identity a little bit. Overall impressions, this was the first time I had been in that portion of the building. I was, again, impressed with, for its age, the condition it is in. It's definitely still feasible to repair it, if that's what makes sense.
Chad?
This was actually my second time of being able to get the tour of the old courthouse all the way up to into the attic and looking up the clock tower and so forth. Being a lifelong resident of Canton and Lincoln County, for me, it's just a part of me. It's a part of Canton. It's a part of Lincoln County. It's a part of our history. And I can't say that I know near as much on the structural side of things as an architect and a couple of longtime contractors and so forth. But the few questions that I asked, I heard the same answers. Yeah, we've got some areas, but they are far from at a point where it cannot be repaired or upgraded. And so just the thought of potentially losing a part of our history that goes back to the original part was quite literally built before we were even a state. We were Lincoln County, Dakota Territory, when the first part of this building was built. And that says a lot, and there's a lot of history there. And, looking forward, I don't know what the best use is. That's what we're tasked with trying to figure out. But what I do know for sure already is that I know, I'm being realistic, that one of the options is or will end up being demolishing it. And that is one that I cannot accept that one. That's the history guy in me. That's the importance of maintaining the identity of Lincoln County and of Canton coming out very strongly there. And I push this out to the public and through my social media and my blog and different areas, and I heard basically the same thing from the people that did reach out to me, and that is save the old courthouse at every cost. So,
Chad, I think last week you told us you were going to chain yourself to the front door. Have you, you still got the,
the chain and the padlock is already purchased, Jim.
Chris, what do you think?
I remember being a kid and coming in and getting license plates with my dad through the south door. The history in the building, I'm with Liz. I think it would change the whole identity of the building. In visiting too, the square footage of the building, I would be curious to see the numbers. Still holding out, this assessment is 5 years old. What it looks like number-wise renovating the building versus building something to get that same square footage that is available in that building, what does that look like to build new, to find, I know there's other buildings being built that we're gonna have some space in, but it's not going to be enough. What does that look like to get another parcel and building in the grand scheme of things, money-wise? So definitely looking for some numbers and some concrete there. And I understand that some of it's maintenance that maybe hasn't been done. We saw some of that walking around the building and walking through the building. There's a handful of upgrades that could probably be done, fairly, I don't want to say cheaply, but, at $100,000, $300,000, and short of that $1 million, $2 million mark. But I still, square footage wise, I'd like to see some harder numbers, and I think we'll get those to come. We've asked for them, I think, right?
Yep, you'll be getting them. Jim?
I do think that, yes, we can get some more years out of the old courthouse, and I'd like to see us do some of that. And I compliment the people who have been taking care of it. It is in good shape for a majority of it. But yet at the same time, I think we kind of have to look at a sunset on it as well. Do we want to get 10 years out of it? Do we want to get 20 years out of it? Do we want to get 5 years out of it? I think we should put a sunset down and start making plans for whatever it might be to transfer some of those people, whether it be to the Justice Center or another form of project building onto that area where we have the Justice Center now. But yeah, I think right now, now isn't the time to demolish it, but it will come at a certain time.
Chris?
I believe that this thing is pretty solid, being built in 1899 and close to 1890. Pretty impressed with the structure of it. Seeing the stability, I know if we built something like this today, it probably wouldn't last as long as this guy has. Seeing the foundation and the stone down there is obviously something that needs to be addressed. The roof, seeing the roof and possibly needing a new roof on it is not a big deal. And the trusses up there, it needs some work. I think everything is manageable and nothing that we can't handle as a community and as a Lincoln County. I think they'd be a very heartfelt gesture towards the history of this county and putting some effort into holding on to it. Honestly, I think it's a lot of stucco. I mean, there's 20-some pages of talking about just stucco upgrades and cracking stucco. I mean, so we gotta replace some stucco. But this is my thoughts.
Well, thank you. One of the, Joel, we heard continually from the courts. Now, you please understand that the courts use that building exclusively for their use, for jury trials and for everything else was over there. And we continually heard about air quality, that the air quality was something that was of concern to them. John, you may want to elaborate a little bit about that, because I know we heard about, I think the two main things were air quality and bats. That were probably, and then, the air exchange. So do you want to just dive into that for just a minute on that, please?
I sure will. John Rombo, Building Superintendent. So, it's the building has air conditioning, and then it has steam heat. The steam heat is it's a little hard to control, and it overheats in the winter, and so we do a lot of fluctuating during the winter. Generally, once the air conditioning is running, it can cool itself fairly decently. But because they didn't add any fresh air return into that part of the building, the humidity level goes up high, And then with the fact that we did have bats, we have done bat mitigation and did some bat cleanup, but you can only clean up so much without really tearing into walls and stuff. So we know there's probably some guano that's up there that we're not seeing. And so once the humidity gets really high in the building, you start smelling that. And you truly can't get a feel for the condition of the air unless we're up there on a really high, warm day with high humidity. So, I mean, today was a warm day, but you need more humidity than this. And then you're going to smell it and you're going to feel it. And that was the complaints that I was getting. It just the air quality was poor. I had it tested. It tested on the safe level for molds, but on the high end of safe. And I tested it during those peak times of year when it was very humid. So I would imagine if we tested it now, it'd be probably fairly decent. But at that time, it did test high, but in the normal range. But that's basically where it's at. If we could put in some kind of fresh air return, like there was discussion of doing, and there was a plan to do it back when they did the remodel back in 2008, 2009, then that would really make the building a lot more environmentally friendly.
And you must precipitated that room. Not to jump around, but, it was pretty consistent from all of you that you were relatively impressed with the overall physical condition of the structure. It was in pretty good shape, I know. Is there anything, John, that you wanted to, when we're talking about that, is there anything on here that you wanted to highlight at all from this book that you handed out? Is there anything, or is that just for our information? What would you say?
My largest concern all along has been the rot in the roof line. I realize those timbers can be replaced. There's a lot of cracking in a lot of the other timbers, and there will have to be some kind of steel banding or bracing mounted to it to firm that up. In the scheme of things, that really wasn't the most expensive thing of this project. So I think that as we talk about the deferred maintenance that's been going on, that needs to be done as soon as possible, in my opinion. I think in my opinion, after we had the derecho, I'd say some of the cracking maybe widened a little bit just because it looks like a little fresher look to the cracks than when we were up there back in 2020. And I'm up there, every 2 or 3 months, probably kind of monitoring it. But we still have some bats, and that was a huge concern of mine then because we didn't have done the cleanup yet. But that's been done, and we've had a few bats, but generally, as you saw when you're up there, it's not overwhelming. There's little bat guano, but not terrible. But then I'll just go back to the HVAC system, because the other thing that would have to be done immediately at the very least is there certain control issues I have in multiple rooms. Like even I house out of the old courthouse, and I have to cycle my air conditioning on 2 or 3 times a day because it just kind of quits talking. The thermostat quits talking to the air conditioning. Well, those kind of control things are about a $4,000 per room fix. So you can start doing that math, and there's some tricky things in like the bigger suite areas because it's controlling multiple units. And so I've got as high as quotes as like $6,000 to replace those kind of control things to those spaces. So we have, probably 3 or 4 of those issues in the old courthouse right now, and we know that we'll have to probably upgrade a lot more than that. And all those numbers were included in this to do that. So I'm all about doing the fix, but I definitely want some sort of fix. And I definitely, my stand on the old building has always been that if we do nothing to it, and it stands like it is, it's a liability to this building. It's, fire hazard, whatever, it's a liability to this building if we don't do something.
John, could you touch on, excuse me, you talked about the cost to upgrade some of the rooms for control and HVAC. Do you know offhand what the energy cost is to work with the system the way it is versus if we made upgrades, would there be a lower utility cost?
I'm not sure there'd be a lot because we do have, it's already a pretty smart system. The steam boiler, if we switched over to a hot water boiler, I believe we'd have some savings, but I don't know those numbers. Generally, it's on a system to where we allow it to, warm up in after hours and cool it back down. We don't have quite as much flexibility in the old courthouse as we would in this building because of the fact it just doesn't recover as fast. So, there could be some savings that way, but I'm not sure what it would be.
Thank you.
John, Liz kind of tripped some triggers in my head, kind of prompted me to ask a similar question is, like you talked about, $4,000 per room, and you could have the HVAC guys come in, et cetera. Is that the kind of upgrade that you may want to, it's kind of like when you buy a new vehicle. Do I fix the old one or do I go out and buy a newer one, right? Well, with regard to those HVAC fixes, if you know, is it better to just buy a new system than what it is to keep putting quarters into this one? At what point, and if you don't have it, certainly understand if you don't have an answer to this, but at what point do you say to yourself, well, I'm not going to keep doing any maintenance I'm not going to do any upgrades to the current one because we know we might at some time install a new one.
Yeah, from the report, they talk about kind of making a hybrid fix, utilizing some of the equipment that's already been replaced and a little bit newer. Because the remodel, they did replace some of the fan coil units and whatnot. And since we did this, we've definitely had 2 fan coil units that have not functioned. And again, a fan coil unit to switch it out for a contractor to switch it out was going to be like $5,000 or $6,000. So it's just like you kind of keep seeing this nickel and diming continuous, But I believe the plan is if we did everything that was listed in this, is it would bring it up to a high enough level that it would maintain for a period of time.
And then I guess the other issue you get into is if you're gonna do a brand new HVAC system, is that something you do after you've, gutted the interior? Do you wait to gut the interior to do that, or is that something that could be done standalone? If you're gonna do these fixes in phases, what phase would it come into? You've got me thinking about all those sorts of different questions too. Because for example, how long do you wait to do the HVAC? Do you have to wait until we, gut the interior and then it comes along with that? Before we fix the HVAC, does that mean we have to do an interior remodel? I'm trying to think through all those things.
Yeah, I'm not sure how well it would be to piecemeal the project. And another thing that's really not discussed in this much at all is upgrades to like the IT system. We're upgrading our phones in the courthouse, and that's definitely going to be upgraded in all the new courthouse, but it's won't be easy nor cheap to upgrade that phone system in the old courthouse. So I think if we're going to remodel the walls and everything, all that would come with that.
And, now that I think about it, the other issue is, in terms of piecemealing, which sometimes can be advantageous, right? Especially in government, if you don't have all the money available to you right away, or even in your own personal budget at home. But, one of the things that Chris York kind of prompted in me is, okay, there's all kinds of outside maintenance that needs to be done, right? So, I'm sure that we could piecemeal out the outside maintenance, We don't have to do the inside maintenance necessarily right away if we know we've got all these easy outside fixes, right? I don't know what your thoughts are about that.
When you say outside, you're meaning exterior?
Yeah, the
type things?
exterior stuff.
Oh, yes, I believe the exterior stuff could definitely be done in separation from the rest of it. And quite honestly, probably the whole roof project and fixing the beams and all that could be separated out of the rest. It does not make it fix the idea of it being a comfortable working space. You know, I'm the guy that's going to get the phone calls that they're saying, "Oh, it's just humid in here. It's miserable. Do something." And then, the building runs amazing when it hits about 5 degrees and colder. But that 30 to 15 degrees, everybody's like, "Turn the heat off. I can't stand it. It's too hot. It's 80 degrees here in the courtroom." Well, I can't cool the courtroom when it's that cold. I don't have any way of bringing any cold air. The way it was designed, you open a window. So that's my dilemma is, I would love to, I want to make a building as comfortable as they can for anybody that occupies it, but there's certain limitations, and there's a lot of limitations in that building.
And I'm just kind of coming at this from the approach of like, a public budgeting perspective, right? Like you only have X number of dollars in the commission budget every year to do certain things, right? And so I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but, if the course of action that's adopted here, that the county commission eventually adopts, is to keep it and then to make some improvements, what I'm wondering is, does it make sense to kind of do it in phases? Do an exterior phase first in year 1 and do an interior phase in year 2 or something like that. I'm just thinking out loud, of course, it could be cobbled together however you want it to, but, just based upon the number of dollars available in the budget, right?
Correct.
To piggyback a little bit off of Joel's line of questioning, I believe it was you, John, last week that made the comment that some of the, like HVAC, plumbing, whatever, some of those things are connected together between the old courthouse and the new part. Is that correct?
Well, very much so. The air conditioning is connected.
Okay.
The heat is standalone.
Okay,
The plumbing to the only 2 bathrooms in that building are standalone, but the fire suppression is completely connected.
okay. So if the end result ends up being, we're keeping the old courthouse and we're gonna do a major renovation project and we wanna build and save it for another 25 years, just throwing a number out. Would we be able to connect all of that stuff in from the new stuff, when I say new stuff, the stuff on the annex side? Can it handle all of that if we just plumbed everything up the new into the old as part of a massive renovation project? Or are the capabilities too limited on this side of it?
Well, that is exactly what the architect was proposing, is abandon the idea of having the steam boiler, put a third hot water boiler into this building, and then heat that building with the hot water instead of steam, which is a lot easier to regulate. And then with the air conditioning and the fresh air, their hope is you could use the existing chimney as a chaseway to bring that air into each of the rooms.
You may or may not know the answer to this question. Do you believe that would be an economical way to proceed if we did go with that? We being the commission decided to go with that concept? Or do you think that would be a money guzzler? And I know that Joel is always thinking money, and that's where his mind goes, and mine doesn't all the time. I freely admit that.
In the scheme of construction, it's going to be expensive.
John, remember, money doesn't grow on trees. It doesn't strike a chord with Chad, though. Okay, well, yeah.
John,
Some of
I'm
you
sitting here listening, and the public as well. When we have to make this decision, I think we have to ask the taxpayers, if the decision was to maintain this whole structure. Okay, we don't have any Band-Aids here. This isn't a quick fix. This isn't just, we're gonna buy about 40 gallons of caulk and have Scott get on scaffolding and volunteer his services. No, we gotta have to really do a makeover. I mean, this has gotta be kind of making a new building out of an old one. So as Jim has mentioned, this thing has gotta be for about 10 to 12, 15, 20 years, or Chad. So we're not skimping anything. When you talk about air exchange, we're gonna have to put state-of-the-art in there. Because that's what because you're gonna be, if you fix it a little here and a little there, you're gonna be a little, and you're just perpetuating the same thing you got now. And I think people have to have an answer to say, if we're gonna spend several millions of dollars on this thing, because it's gonna take, we're gonna get some numbers. Because if we didn't want it, and we wanna tear it down, we're gonna have to pay for that. And if we did tear it down, what do we put in its place? So, I mean, this is not going to be cheap. I mean, this is going to be something that I think we're going to have to wrestle, a commission is going to have to wrestle with. How do we pay for this? Or do we have the latitude of putting aside X number of dollars out of a tight budget every year to try to pay for this? Can the commission borrow the money? Will it result in, I'm just going to use a word, we've never had one, but are we going to have to use an opt-out to pay for that? I mean, is that something? I mean, that all can be in front of the taxpayers to say, do you want to pay the extra dollars to renovate that building? Or I'm sure they don't want to pay the extra dollars to tear the darn thing down, but I mean, this is going to be a costly exercise. And I want to emphasize that all the time, because I don't think we're going to get by on the cheap here. Because if that's all we're going to do is just put a Band-Aid, we're Band-Aiding that thing forever. And every year, the Band-Aids are going to get more expensive.
There's a lot of truth in what you're saying, Commissioner Schmidt. And, to wait to do something is costly. And I think, thinking back at, in 2020, we could have passed a bond for $50 million. That would have built us a nice facility up there by T, and still had several $1 million to use on this courthouse, on the old courthouse. And I was one that felt that that was too steep, that was not worthwhile, and the bond rate was very low. And now, of course, we ended up building a justice center, and, waiting to do that was something was necessary, but it did cost us probably more money than if we had done something in 2020. And, the same thing is true with roundabouts. We could have put in a couple of roundabouts for $3.5 million, and eventually, it went up to a vote and it was turned down, and now I don't know if we could do one roundabout for $3.5 million. So waiting isn't always the right thing, because it does cost you, and taxpayers have to realize that as well, that in time, something will have to be done with that old facility that we do have. And maybe it's better to do it sooner than later.
Another thing, that what would we do if the old courthouse were to be renovated? What would we do with that? How would we, because it's a courthouse now. So when you look at that, Liz, you look at the footprint, what you have all kinds of little hearing rooms, you got jury rooms, you got a huge a courtroom, you got a lot of rooms there. So in addition to not only renovating the building, you have to retrofit the internal to accommodate whatever is going to be moved over there. as departments increase in size because of population growth. So we have a couple of things to think about as well, is what walls do you get tore out? What are we going to use it for in the long run? So, I mean, if we're going to save it, we got to have a justification of saying it will be needed because of growth here. In this building, we're going to outgrow the facility. And that's, for some, that's kind of hard to understand, but our neighbors to the north are experiencing the very same thing in Minnehaha County, where they have now just commissioned a study to look at renovating an old building or old space they have, and if that's going to be as prudent as building a new one. And that was something we got handed out today from Dakota Scouts, so, anyway.
John, and I'm not holding you to this because I know we're still waiting to get some estimates on, updated, refreshed estimates for what it would cost to remodel the existing courthouse. And maybe this is just something so obvious, but we haven't stated it, and maybe it's prudent to wait for the estimates. But is it safe to say that new construction of the same amount of square footage would be much more expensive than remodeling? Or am I off base on that?
I really don't have a firm answer on that. I mean, remodeling is expensive. But as you know from when we looked at adding on to the highway shop, it wasn't a lot of space and that was a really expensive project. So,
Can we start with telling the public how many square feet roughly are in the old courthouse? Because people probably don't know roughly how many square feet are in the old courthouse.
Good question, Chris.
it's 12,475. What?
12,000 what,
Excuse me.
John?
I was thinking,
75.
no, he's on the wrong slide.
Updating.
I've got all
That
the
was
square
usable
footages
space.
here on everything.
Yeah.
I worked on that this weekend.
Yep.
Your new Justice Center is 82,000 square feet.
Okay,
This 2008 edition here is 62,000 feet. The old courthouse, the outside building is 21,000 square feet with the basement and the 3 floors. The net square footage that's usable is 14,000
in the old courthouse?
in the old
Doug?
courthouse,
Yeah.
yep.
Because that doesn't include any of the storage.
Thank you, Doug. What happened, Doug, this is a dumb question, but we got a lot of dumb questions these days. You said we had 21,000 outside, right?
That's the footprint
That's
of
the
the whole
outside
building.
perimeter.
Yeah.
And 14 usable
14
internal.
14 net. Yeah.
Okay, all
Because you
right.
gotta take out your walls and
Yep.
everything else, and the basement's not usable,
Yep,
so.
thank you.
So some construction and remodeling, Doug, could theoretically maybe free up a little bit of usable space, primarily in the basement. Is that,
Yeah,
okay,
yeah, because that's not counted in this.
okay.
Altogether, with what Lincoln County has for office space, and you just rented 1,850 square feet up in Harrisburg. Lincoln County has 166,000 square feet of office space. Then you gotta take about 7,000 off that, so you're roughly, you got 155, 160,000 square feet of usable space.
Commissioner Schmidt, to your point of determining what the space gets used for, that will directly impact some of the HVAC design, because if you change the use from an office to a different use, that could change the requirements for CFM, and different design-related costs.
And something to keep in mind too, that popped into my head was, I mean, just last week, the commission, entered into an agreement with the Harrisburg School District to share some space in the old elementary school in Harrisburg, which to me is a great way of working together with your fellow governmental people, what's to say if, instead of just saying, well, if we renovate the old courthouse, we have to fill it with county
No.
departments or offices. Maybe we reach out as a county, and we have a Canton City Commissioner sitting here, so I'm gonna put him on the spot a little bit. Because it's what I do. Everybody that knows me knows that's what I do. But it's no secret that the city of Canton is desperately short of space within their city hall, within their police department.
I've thought about
Why
it
not?
all week.
Asking that question to the city commission of Canton and being, is there a way for Lincoln County and the city of Canton to work together and potentially make it a multi-use facility? Just throwing it out there.
And I didn't even think about your city, but how many other county offices of any sort, let's talk WIC, let's talk social services, let's talk all of those departments that used to be, and I don't know if they still are, because it's been years, that you used to rent a building here or a building there. Can we bring those back home and give up that rent? Where the county's not shelling out that money to rent another space. I don't know what's out there that they're paying, but I mean, are those options? I don't know.
Chris, this may be a little off, but for many of those programs that you just mentioned are usually pigeonholed into small office space, very small, and therefore, the programs that they offer on child care, prenatal care, so many of the things that are available to the public at no cost, but yet can add to better health care, always need more room. So you make a good point that if you were able to have adequate space for many of these programs that can benefit the public, now you have space to execute them, rather than, trying to fit them into finding some other area. So I think that's an excellent point.
Well, and the bottom line is that we still are the fastest growing county in the state of South Dakota, and the fifth fastest growing in the nation?
I think top
We're-
10 now.
Okay, that's not gonna stop. We're gonna always need, I remember a comment that Jim Schmidt made a couple meetings ago, and that was, what the population of Lincoln County was when he became a county commissioner, and what the population is today.
They were,
Back in the 1800s.
they were still riding horses back then.
On the WIC stuff, and some of those those programs, they used to rent office space in the courthouse. They were actually just on the hall here, and they've all been regionalizing to Sioux Falls. So they've already been pulling back out of, regardless of kind of, instead of asking for more space, they're all kind of regionalizing into Sioux Falls. So that is something to consider.
So that wouldn't change, Paul, if we came back to him
I
and said, hey, we
don't
got a big
know.
office
I'm not
space.
an expert on it. I just know that they've left. I don't know if they left for bigger space elsewhere, but I just know that they have started regionalizing back in Sioux Falls.
Do we have a percentage of how many square feet or how many rooms are gonna be emptied out of this area into the new? Like, is there 20% that's gonna move into that? Like, what are we looking at for a percentage out here that's gonna be empty?
So
Our
when
states.
Chris, when the judiciary moves to the new courthouse, you're gonna empty out pretty close to 100% of the old
Okay.
courthouse, okay?
Yeah.
Nobody will be leaving this facility, the annex, except for the state's attorney's office. They will. But trust me, there's plenty of people who work in this building that got their dibs on that new office space. But in all seriousness, to answer your question, just about 100% of that space is gonna get added out. And then there's some storage needs for our election equipment and stuff that have to get sorted out. But, Chris, to your question, I'm pretty sure that, WIC and some of those other programs now, they've left us not because of any concerns about space issues or anything like that. It's because their office footprint has been getting smaller. In fact, that WIC program came in here a couple years ago and made a really good presentation, even showing the distances that people have to drive to get to the different offices. I mean, it was amazing, the work they put into that. And what they decided was to no longer be in each county courthouse. They were just going to make the program participants drive to a more central location because they couldn't just justify, all the cost of having a footprint like that. And then just one other thing for people to remember. So basically here in Lincoln County, we're not that spread out, but, we've got the airport, we've got the 4-H building in Lenox, we've got this courthouse here, we've got the Harrisburg substation for law enforcement, and then we have what is it, John, 1 or 2 storage sheds outside around Canton here that we're in?
We have one storage
Okay.
unit, or storage facility.
And then we've got the highway shop. But that's what our county footprint looks like for real estate right now.
And I don't want us to get too hung on the WIC, but I think there's other county, city programs that could potentially be candidates to utilize the space. It was my idea.
School board?
Your school,
School.
you name it. Pick a somebody that's renting.
Yep.
Okay, I'd like to say,
Okay.
we're talking about a sunset on this building. I've heard 10, 15, 25 years. So if we're gonna use this thing for the next 10 or 15 or 25 years, what are we gonna do after that? I mean, I think that's something we better look at. I mean, we wanna offer it to the city, we wanna offer it to all these other people, but 25 years, we're gonna say get out?
I think the idea, just like he said, was there has to be a contingency plan to build then, to save some revenue somewhere. Because is the building in 20 years going to be feasible? And just like the commissioner said, do we go big or go home with the HVAC, or do you keep nickel and diming it? So, listen, if we keep nickel and diming it, John can't leave. Because after last week and doing the tour, he's got it dialed in on the boiler where he knows what time to turn it on, what time to turn it down, what time to turn it up, what time to turn it off, to keep that building remotely comfortable for the people in it. So it's either we fix it and we try to make it a long haul as long as we possibly can, and then try to keep some funds back in that 25 years and we build then. And I don't know what that looks like 25 years from now. Inflation and who knows what kind of predicament we're in then for building costs. And land and I could and if myself right out the door.
Well, right now, what does Lincoln County need for space? Can we utilize that efficiently? Or is it just something that we're gonna stuff something into and make it work?
I think, good question, Scott. I think that we've spent some time, John, you and I have talked about what potentially can go over there, I don't know that you would use all 14,000 square feet, but there was some portion of it that we had looked at.
To be honest, with the space that does get freed up, because what wasn't mentioned earlier is courtroom 2B, which is the second largest courtroom, will be freed up, and that's in the new building. So honestly, with what we projected for growth, with talking to all the department heads, this building with those vacancies would handle it. Now,
For how long?
it supposedly for 20 years, but that said, it has to be modified, and modifications cost money as well. We looked at one time of combining planning and zoning and equalization and removing the hallway that's right above us, and that was probably back in like 2019 or 2020, and that was about a $500,000 project then. You start, doing those kind of things, and it just, the money adds up. One thing that really came out in all of our discussions with all the departments is, and they want a place to meet as a group and do training and that stuff. We really don't have that. We have a multi-purpose room in the basement, which just doesn't even, it barely handles a department head meeting. When we do safety training, CPR training or something, we do it in here. We move everything out of here because we need this much floor space, and even that's not really adequate. We got to do multiple classes throughout the day to handle everything. So that type building over there could be utilized for that as well. But I do want you to say, I put a lot of thought into it, and it definitely, we could occupy what would be freed up if that part of the building went away. Now, that said, it would be a lot easier and would flow better as if we did remodel that and we slowly stage people and moved them over there in departments. And it's hard to say how that would work. We really never discussed. I mean, internally, we have some ideas of who would maybe go where, but, I'm not really.
But John, you bring up a point, if this building, you have a footprint, as Doug has said, you've got 62,000 square feet in this particular building. Okay, and it seems like a lot, and can it handle it? But it can handle it providing that you remodel internally to accommodate the growth or the changing of different departments. So when you start adding what the cost of that is versus being able to move maybe a portion of that to a building adjacent to it, the old courthouse, it's a widget here, you can move all kinds of signs, but I understand how you say we can use this, to Scott's point, but on the other hand, it's gonna be damn costly to keep it that way. And maybe it's a lot more efficient to overhaul an old one and remodel that thing while you're rehabbing it, because you're getting into the structure. And now you really are designing for specific things, like training is a big deal here. Because there's no room for any of that kind of stuff, so, or big meetings. I have a question for Joel. If we remodeled that building and we had excess space, can we rent that out to a commercial enterprise, or do they have to buy a portion of that?
No, we could rent out if we wanted to. I mean, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head right now whether there's any courthouses in South Dakota that do that, but I don't think there's any prohibition on it.
Now, I'm not picking on you, but, you could put a law office in there, for example, I'm just thinking of.
Are you talking to Harrisburg?
No, if you remodeled the old courthouse and you had excess space and you had some rental facilities, could you put a law office in there,
Yeah, I think there's no prohibition on that. Obviously, you start to get into the philosophical issue then of whether the government should be in competition with private enterprise.
Yeah.
But just in terms of the legality of it, I don't think there's any issue with that.
Okay.
Is this a good spot to segue into what was one of the things we were tasked with on the agenda for tonight, which is to just create a list of potential options? Are we at we've talked about several. Is it time to just put it down on a piece of paper so we can say we
I think it's a
accomplished
good
our
time.
agenda?
Good point, Chad.
Thank you. I'll start. Option number 1, tear the building down. That's the easiest one, so that's why I picked
Oh,
that
yeah.
one. Not that I
I got that
support
one.
that one,
Oh,
but
Can I add hoc to that option that for those of us that want to preserve the history, there are options and technology out there to 3D scan the building. It wouldn't be the same experience, but we could still, in theory, preserve parts of the history.
Paul, didn't we have the three major options?
We've talked.
Yeah.
We've talked about them, but we never wrote it down. I think
Yeah.
that what we've talked about is
tearing it down,
you can tear it-
remodeling it, and building something new or something.
Yeah, so you can tear it down and just cover up the open wounds on the new side. You could tear it down and put something in its place, whatever that may be. That can take whatever form you want in the future, or you remodel. Were the three main options we discussed when we went into it. Obviously, you could do minimum maintenance or whatever within that remodel, but those would be the three: tear it down and leave it, tear it down, put something else there, and remodel.
Before we go, Chad, one moment. The members of the public, do you have any comments or questions that you would like to raise right now? Or anything?
Jason Vanentop, rural Lincoln County. I got a couple things I'd like to share with y'all. As you know, maybe you don't know, but I'm a farmer. And one thing that has always been instilled in me is I'm a steward of the land. I've cherished the history of my farm and my family. And I certainly think that Lincoln County needs to look at that with this building as well. You know, when our forefathers built this, they didn't think that, oh geez, is it only going to last 25, 30 years? No, they built it for a lifetime and generations. I think you are tasked with that. I think you need to scrap the idea of this thing is going to just be done in 20 years. You need to plan for multiple generations to come, because this is a prominent building in Lincoln County, in Canton. I liken it to the Kennedy Mansion. You look at David Amundsen, he didn't tear that thing down. He spent, I have no idea what he spent, but I think that's kind of where you guys need to, the way you need to look at this is preserve the history, and with the new building you guys are going to go move into soon, there's certainly going to be maintenance issues that are going to go along with that brand new building. And it's just like the old. If you have it, I mean, I got a couple old 100-year-old homes that one I totally redid because it was my grandmother's. You know, it's sentimental. Was it the best use of resources? Probably not. But it was my grandma's. And that means something to me. And I feel like this courthouse means something to everyone here. I certainly share your sentiments, Chad. I'd hate to see this thing disappear. It's a landmark for Lincoln County. So that's about all I have to say. So I think you just, as much as Lincoln County is growing, there's certainly going to be a need for those extra spaces. Now, yes, is it going to be cheap? Heck no. It's going to be terrible. You know, I'm planning, where we're building a house now, it's ridiculous. You know, but it's what it is. So I thank you for serving on the board, taking your time, but I really, really feel like we have to find a way to preserve what it is. So, thank you.
I have enough chain, Jason, if you want to join me.
Huh?
I have enough chain that
Well, you
if you
better,
want to
yeah,
join
good,
me.
good.
I'll just buy a second padlock.
You know, Jason, to your point, if you go to Europe, I've never been there, but when you read about it, they have buildings that are hundreds and hundreds of years old that they have maintained, you know, over time.
Yeah,
And that's part of a history that you have.
yeah.
And it is something to be said in our modern generation of building something and it has life expectancy of X amount of years and we tear it down.
Yeah.
You know, I wonder sometime when I go over these interstate bridges and they look fine and they look as good as what they were, but
No,
that someone said, it's time to tear the darn things down. So I share that, the
You know,
same
there's-
feelings.
yes, there is a timeline for everything, right? I understand that. I have taken houses down myself, but from what I understand and the discussion that I've listened to, I wish I could have come when you guys toured, but it just didn't work. But from what I understand, everything is fixable, right?
Yeah.
It's fixable. And yes, I think it would be prudent for Lincoln County to do so. So,
Thanks,
thanks.
Jason. Thank you.
And I think, to Jason's point, maybe we change our term of sunsetting to not necessarily getting rid of the building, but maybe in 25 years it turns into a historical museum. By then, who knows? Listen, I'm gonna knock on wood somewhere, but maybe Sioux Falls and Harrisburg are close to Canton, and we start, I know you don't wanna hear me say, nobody wants to hear me say that, but you see what I'm getting at, with the growth that we're experiencing, we can start turning that into something else. It doesn't mean it has to, in my mind, it doesn't mean it has to go away either, but maybe we don't use it for county business anymore. We use it for something else, historical wise. We turn it into some sort of historical value at that point.
Linda?
Yeah. Linda Montgomery from Fairview, South Dakota. Thank you. I love the work that's been done. I am pro saving a building like that. It'll probably take you more money to tear that thing down than build it up. I guess my questions are very basic. I don't care, the new Justice Center, the pretty new penny, needs maintenance. And we have to trust our team to make sure that maintenance is done. I heard when we first opened that there was money allotted to update that building. Or not update, but do maintenance. And what I heard, and I couldn't be wrong, is that maintenance was not done 5 years ago. That is not acceptable. Yes, I mean, I don't care if you have a brand-new building. The importance is maintenance. That's how you maintain the integrity of the structure. If it's built in a year, if it's built in 20 years, if it's built in 50 years or 100. To do the upkeep that's needed, if we fail at that, we have failed. And this building, I agree so much with Jason. This is part of history. I'm from Austin, Minnesota. Our high school is like 2 blocks long, a building just about like that, and the whole thing that, we have to turn it, tear it down, we have to do this. And thank God someone with some insight didn't do that. And that continues today, and I'm old, and that continues today to be one of the major buildings in that town. Yes, they had to put in new windows, yes, but you walk in that building and it's history. And it's better built than anything they're building today. And it's going to withstand more than the buildings today. And I'm not saying anything about construction, but, if you've ever bought a new refrigerator lately, and you got an old one in the building that's, in the basement that's still working better than your new refrigerator, come on. That's what we're looking at here. Please, and as far as what can it be used for? A professional building, whether it's county, whether it's private, it's needed, whether it's for education. And there's also, I just kept sitting there, and the one word that kept going through my head is a jail. I know that's not popular, but that's big enough to be a jail for the town this size. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Ryan McKinney can't say, say it was talked about, cost of new construction versus repairing the old, but nobody said a cost. What did the new cost for the new Justice Center and the annex cost per square foot? What was the numbers?
The total construction cost on the new courthouse is 54 to 56 million,
Okay, and what was the square footage?
82,000.
What's that
It's
work out?
$658 a square foot. When this one here was built in 2008, it's 7.2 million. This was $116 a square foot.
What was that, Doug? We spent $116?
Slow down, slow down.
And in 2008, for this building here,
Yep,
was 7.2 million.
yep.
That's $116 a square foot. The Justice Center is 82,000 square feet for 54 million. That's $658 a square foot. And remodeling is always cheaper than building new, right, Doug? You know. 'Cause we work with you quite a bit.
So the highway shop, if I remember right, it was estimated that we thought we might have to pay like 440,000 or per
the
square foot.
offices.
And it turned out our lowest bid was like 950.
Right.
Yeah,
So it was double that for a remodel, though. Remember, that's an addition and a remodel. But
yeah.
And that was because of, just for the benefit of everybody who may not have heard the meeting, that was because the highway shop out there is made of all steel or all metal, and the addition had to be made out of that as well. We couldn't, I guess we're not allowed to mix a wood structure with a metal one, so.
So I guess where I'm going with this, and it's gonna be kinda lengthy here. At the last meeting, Joel asked me, he goes, do you have any questions? I said, no, I wanna see if they can get answered and what other ones I come up with. Never looked at the handout you had for your report. Went around the whole building. Thought of all the stuff I found wrong. Everything was in that report from 4.5 years ago. And nothing was fixed. I mean, they're talking about gutters or downspouts you can add to get the water away, to fix your problem with water seeping in the basement. The only thing that changed is the one gutter completely fell off.
Well, I understand what you're saying, and I'm not justifying everything, but money is not, we, we had lots of places to spend money, and we spent a lot of money internally trying to satisfy the courts, so.
This is
if-
something where it would take two
If you looked at the money
screws.
we did spend inside to try to take care of the courts, so that they wouldn't come in here all the time and tell them that it's not an inhabitable place and the environment's bad and they can't keep workers and all that other kind of stuff. So there was only so much money to go around.
I understand
Yeah.
that, but this would take two screws to fix.
Yeah.
And it was regrading the dirt around the outside. That's a perfect summer project if you can find a little summer help. Gibbons said 5 to 15 years he wants a sunset. Well, as Jason brought up, that shouldn't be. I actually have it written down here as I'm sitting here tonight. Houses in New England, 1,700 years old. You watch this old house, it's nothing for them to walk into 1,700, what's that, 300-year-old house now, 350-year-old house? Europe, add another couple hundred. There was nothing wrong with this building. I mean, the basement is in better shape than probably 90% of the houses in town. Yeah, and as far as, the interior, Paul actually said when we were up there that he wouldn't mind the judge's chamber as his office. I think that's saying
That's
something.
mostly because of the windows.
Well, but you don't get that in the new one, right?
What's the wait list on that office?
And Joel, I was listening to him as we were going through, and he was talking about the Miller Courthouse being a museum and something spectacular that you don't see. Well, if you want something to be done, you have the perfect opportunity to do something like that here. Just turn it into a museum, show some county history, and preserve it. And then also, it gives you the flex space where, as the departments grow and shrink, you can use it as a go-between before you have to build a new building. You don't think you should build a new
I
building?
don't think we need another new building.
No, but in the future you will. And I'm not saying tear the courthouse down, but it's a perfect go-between to always use.
Yeah.
But you will build a new building at some point.
Not
The,
to,
the county's growing. You just said today, this annex is only good for 20 years. 20 years isn't very long.
Well, we did build it when we put it up. We thought we had all kinds of space,
Mm-hmm.
but one courtroom devoured all of the space, you know,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So,
But in 20 years, you're gonna be back in the same boat, looking at a new building.
well, you're
Sounds
gonna be
like.
well over 100,000 people too.
Exactly. And I don't think it's gonna take 20 years to get there. So, I don't think you should tear it down personally. It's a good thing to save some history. And like I say, you can use it as some flex space as departments shrink and grow, and hell, you already put the money into the thing to upgrade it all. So,
Anybody else? Come on up now, don't be bashful.
This probably, I don't know, I wasn't planning on talking, but when she mentioned the jail. So this would be a yes or no question. I don't expect a lot of explanation, but I heard a rumor that this place out here, this Justice Center, and the future beyond that, down the road, probably, I don't know what I heard, but anyway, that there will be a jail. Is that totally a rumor coming out there
I'll
on the
address-
other
Let the
side?
commissioners answer that question.
I'll address that, because I love
And
putting
then-
my hand on the electric fence a lot.
And then another building on the other side of
He's
that,
with his chin,
is it a total rumor?
Over my dead body.
body.
But in all seriousness, number one, it is true that the architects who were building the Justice Center, they put that on one of their renderings and drawings.
Okay.
That to the north of the Justice Center would be a future jail. That was not done by my request. I can't speak for any other commissioner whether they requested that or not. But I'll just tell you, I'm opposed to that. I've told everybody I'm opposed to that because I view the future as counties working much closer together, especially when half of our prisoners are arrested in Sioux Falls city limits. I'll get off the soapbox right now because I know others probably have different opinions, but it's not a rumor that it was on a drawing.
Okay.
But there has been no discussion, at least with me and other commissioners, whether there's gonna be a jail there or not. But I'll
Okay.
just tell you flat out, my position is, keep working with Minnehaha County.
I want to dovetail on that. Sometimes Commissioner Aaron's and I don't agree, but on this one, we stand side by side. I
very
don't
good.
think that when you have this intergovernment kinds of things, it's time that we learn that we don't all need a jail. I mean, not every county needs one. They're an expensive item. I think there's regional things that could have been done. When we have the relationship that we have with Minnehaha County, sorry about that. Well, this is the most persistent phone I've ever seen here. We are able to, in our foreseeable future, have our jail needs taken care of in Minnehaha County in a much cheaper fashion than it is. When you look at what we pay for our annual rent, so to speak, and if we were to have a jail, it would cost us more to run it than it does to rent it. So I'm not in favor of a jail. I think this system that we have works well. So, no, and you're right, someone did put a rendering on there. There were commissioners, not naming anybody, but who wanted that, Sally Port, and wanted all of that. And I think that pretty well has been negated. And what we should take care of is courtrooms, and let's just take care of our business and not worry about jails right now.
Thank you. I just thought all this that we're talking about here, and then we're having another new building out there, is that true? That was it, yes or no? So
Yeah. No,
I'm glad you clarified
no
it.
jail.
Okay. No other buildings either, right? For now?
No, but on her question there, with no other buildings, there is room, there's property
Yes.
there that they could build a building
Oh, yeah.
in the
Yes.
future.
Yes.
Now, we have
We
adequate
talked about
space
that
up
last
there.
week, yes. There is adequate space there to build something.
John, maybe something a little less controversial. Do you have any kind of timeline on when you think you or these third-party companies could get back to us with some of their refreshed or updated numbers?
The short answer, I do not have a timeline. We've been kind of playing phone tag this week just to have these numbers updated. And that's still, I mean, it's early in the game, so they're not just probably going to update these numbers without saying, yeah, we want some money to do that. So that's what I anticipate getting this week is, whatever that number is to say, okay, we'll go back to all of our engineers and we'll have them update their numbers. I've been told different things. Lately, I've been told it shouldn't be very expensive, so hopefully we can make that happen really quick. I've also then will work together with that architectural company and the architectural company that's doing the new building and try to get an idea what they would estimate the demolition would be and what potentially just putting a facade on the building would be. But once you start looking at doing any kind of an attachment, the options are too unlimited to even begin to put a number on that.
John, if we wanted to get this in a timely fashion, what kind of money would it take for an architect firm to do that?
I don't know.
Is it,
I don't know.
you don't know?
Commissioner, I want to go back to Brian's comments. I think what he did a very good job of is summing up tonight a reoccurring message that I'm hearing from the public and the members of this board is stop deferring the maintenance. That's the one thing I'm hearing. Another thing I'm hearing is he fully supports the Stuffed Animal Museum in the middle of this building, just like Gerald County up in Miller does. I know we're lightening the mood here, but just so folks now, and so the public knows, Brian and I were talking about this. I was up in the Gerald County Courthouse, that's up in Miller. Or excuse me, where are they at?
Miller's hand count.
That's Han County, I'm sorry. Where's Gerald at?
Wessington Springs. Wessington.
Oh, okay. I was in Han County then. My apologies. I was definitely in Miller. So we're in the Han County Courthouse, and that is a very old building. And those county commissioners have done a very good job of, as well as their team, of maintaining that courthouse. They have totally restored the third floor courthouse to look like probably what it looked like in the early 1900s. And yes, they do have a number of stuffed animals, taxidermy that was trapped in the local area. And they have more guns in a county courthouse than I've ever seen. They have dozens of old rifles in these viewing cases everywhere in that courthouse. And they've got some other historic artifacts as well. And that's something that's kind of been sanitized from here in Lincoln County, other than a couple photos we got on the wall of some old time stuff. So, because the other message I keep hearing from folks is tonight that they want to maintain the history and they'd like to see some kind of emphasis put on bringing back and showcasing the history of the county. And there is a lot of history in this county to showcase. So I'm hearing that as well. And then I'm also kind of hearing the message, please correct me if I'm wrong, that generally speaking, and this is without the benefit of numbers, and I know everybody's comments are without the benefit of numbers, but they see some value in remodeling and fixing up and we don't really know what new construction is, but y'all can do the math. And so that's kind of the message I'm hearing tonight from the public and the members of the committee.
I definitely would concur with you. I've heard the structure is sound, and, I think what we have reached a point where, there's kind of a general consensus that tearing it down is the least option right now, because we don't know numbers, but until we get those numbers, we really can't make any good decisions. I got a question for Doug, though. I know we need architects to come in and tell us what we should do, could do, or all that kind of stuff. But, if I had a house, I'd call you up, Doug, and I'd say, okay, you're crawling around, what kind of cost are we talking about for a roof? And what kind of things do we have to put in for rafters and tuck points and all that other kind of stuff? Is there nobody that can give us a kind of a good estimate on what that's going to cost?
Well, we were a general contractor, no offense to you, but we never got an architect involved because they were too expensive. And right here, you got your assessment done. You should be able to take this to a contractor. He should be able to give you a price for doing the outside work. You don't need an architect.
When we like Huguenot?
Yeah, whoever you want to get, yeah. A couple of,
Well,
yeah, you could go to a couple of different contractors.
I like local myself.
Right.
I mean,
Can I, so here's the problem.
get in trouble.
We're a government agency,
Right.
so we have
Probably
to
not
get like pricing.
money, yeah.
So that means we have to have bids that are apples for
Right.
apples.
Yep.
So if I don't have an architect or an engineer that writes a specification that says, this is what you're gonna do, bam, 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 bam,
Yeah,
down to the
really,
fine lines,
yeah.
you're not gonna get that.
Yeah. That's why
Because
that gets
you
so
talk
expensive.
about like a fan coil unit. You could put a really cheap one in, you could put a really expensive one in. Some people are gonna say, I would never put in a cheap one, I'm gonna do this. Well, we're gonna take low bid, so
Yeah,
we're
you
gonna
have to
get
have
something
the
that's
specs.
pure junk, probably.
Yeah, you have
You know
to
what I
get the
mean?
specs.
So that's the problem, is you gotta bring in the architect, engineer, to get that document to go to bid. And that's where it always comes down to. Everybody always wants, when they come to me, they go, well, this is a little project, let's just reach out. Well, I'm trying to put a fence up around a parking lot, and I have 3 contractors that gave me all different feet of what they want to put in for a fence. So I'm talking to them and going, all right, I painted a line, I measured it, none of your numbers match my numbers. Now you guys ought to come and tell me why they don't match. Because
When that-
I've got to go to the board with
Right.
apples to apples.
But see, John, you got an architecture right here.
Right.
If you took this to a contractor, this is all maintenance. Why would you have to get an architect involved in that, though? Because it's replacing stucco and caulking and
So
tuck pointing.
I caulked this building, right? 3 different caulking bids. Everybody says, all right, I'm gonna do this many linear feet. And I'm telling you what, I went out there with, laser finders and I measured what caulk lines I would.
Right.
And, and I will tell you, I missed I missed the ephes joints, right? Well, so then we get the bid, we award the bid to the lowest bid, and then they get in there like, oh, we missed this and this and this. Well, and this wasn't in our bid. Well, then guess what? I can only adjust that low bid by a certain percentage legally, otherwise I go to scratch it all and go back to a rebid. So again, it seems easy,
Yeah, I know,
but it's not.
because we worked with them all the time.
Yeah, I'm just saying, it's not that
That's where-
easy.
That's where the expense comes in.
But, yeah, so that's why I don't want to ever steer away from using the professional engineering and architectural firms. The good thing with that is if we make that decision, we can do that without going to bid just to get that firm to do the work, because it's legal to get the design work done without having to bid that out.
But see, a lot of this is just, they should be able to take this and get you a rough idea, really,
So,
And start fixing the exterior a little bit.
So I want to talk about that too. So this, county government, I just submitted my budget for 2026. And there isn't a dollar on it to do anything to that building, because I've been kind of being told, let's not do anything until we know where we're going to go. The focus has been on the new building, right? And granted, it seems crazy, but 5 years came and went pretty quick. For the 2020, the first year was nothing but COVID and a blur, basically. But my budget would have to be modified now to do the work next year.
Right, I
I mean,
understand.
the commissioners they can go out, advertise and modify my budget to do it as soon as possible, but it's gonna take them to do that.
Yep.
I always come to this spring and I start looking at my budget for the following year in January, February, March. Well, all my numbers were turned in a month ago, so already in April, I've got my numbers turned in for next year, so then it's a little bit of work to modify it. And then it's, of course, comes down to me selling it, and it's not always easy to sell
Yeah.
that this stuff
No,
has
I
to get done.
understand that.
So that's just how, and like I said, it's truly a term called deferred maintenance. When it comes to maintenance of buildings, it's easy to kick the can down the road and defer it till the next year. And then here we are, and
4 or 5 years go past real fast.
right. And as far as the downspouts go, just so you know, we have reattached those. The wind seems to blow them off, but I do have plans to get those extended.
Commissioner Aaron's, we've chased this rabbit pretty good around here tonight. But until we really get numbers, it's really hard to really make any, go forward on this thing. We can get some better ideas on space utilization, maybe from department heads, looking at that, looking at different options within the structure, whether it's for training or whether it's for office, what kind of offices would we have, what kind of things do we need. But until we really get some hard numbers on what it would cost to remodel or to remove, we really can't go anywhere. So John, I'm not putting the B on you here. If you need money to do this and we're serious about it, you gotta come in front of the commission and we gotta try to find a few extra dollars because this is serious stuff. I mean, we've moved all this stuff. We've got a great committee here that have devoted time and energy, so I don't know how we go about it. Do we get a guesstimate from some ARC firm? Do they, ARC Inc., are they the ones that we're looking at and what it would take for them to push this button and get this thing done? Or aren't they answering the phone either?
No, so I have been in contact with ARC Inc. now,
Yeah.
but we haven't met in person. They know,
Okay.
they're telling me they're interested to help us out do more.
Okay,
I'm more than willing to do that. I had a great relationship with them and putting this whole report together 5 years ago. But we've gotta meet, they've gotta give me their costs, then I gotta come to you and I gotta get those approvals. And then they have to have the time to do it. So yes, I've said from the beginning, this wasn't really gonna be something that we could resolve in 1 month. It's just, we can't pull
John,
it off that quick.
could we do this, John? I'd be happy to set up a meeting and meet with them. Give us a timeline so that we can come back to this committee and saying that it will be a month, just tossing out numbers before we get any hard numbers. And then we will call you back in and we'll send you the information. All the information would be sent to this committee. And then we will rejoin them and talk and digest them. Is that a fair way to go forward?
Yes, that's a very fair way to go.
Okay.
I've got a suggestion.
Yes.
In 2020, the exterior was 375,000, right? Can't we budget $500,000 for John's budget? And move forward. I mean, the building needs to be maintained. That's all there is to it. We're gonna maintain it or tear it down. If we don't maintain it, we're one step closer to tearing it down. That's all there is to it. We've ignored it and ignored it and ignored it. It's time we do something. Either do something or tear it down, one or the other. And I'm all in favor of spending $500,000 and maintaining this thing.
Well, Scott, I'm not arguing with you. I'm just saying, well, about $500,000, but is that going to be the adequate amount that was needed to really put it in the condition that we want it to be?
Well, you gotta do the exterior first and then
Yeah.
save the exterior.
I think that's kind of what I was getting at earlier, John, is, some kind of phased approach. I don't think a phased approach is the same thing as a Band-Aid approach. Because in government, you only got so many dollars. And, you know, it's just like folks at home. I can paint my house this year, and then next year I can put a new roof on, and then maybe in year 3 I can remodel the kitchen. But I can't remodel the kitchen, paint the house, and put a new roof on all in the same year. So that's kind of what I was, you know, trying to get at is, can you create a phased approach plan of, if we were gonna keep this building, how would we attack it, you know, over the course of, say, like 3 years or something?
So, we're kind of put what came first, the chicken or the eggs. This group was supposed to decide, do we tear it down or do we fix it? If we sure the heck weren't gonna put $500,000 in the exterior and then tear it down in 2 years, right? So we had to make the decision, and still, I guess officially, or the board has to officially decide, that we're gonna keep it and then start investing money into it. But that's been the dilemma all along is I think there's always been a lot of mixed opinions. What's the best option, you know? And that particular question hasn't been answered, and it probably still isn't officially answered.
Or do you put it up to the election, have an election? But then you're talking a year again.
Yeah, you're pushing it down the road.
Yeah.
So John, are you asking for, perhaps a vote from this committee? Tear down or move forward with saving it? So that then you can, and the commissioners on this committee can bring it back to the full commission and say, this is the first recommendation from the old courthouse committee.
Jed, I know what you want, but I'm not in favor of taking a vote at this time. I think that there's a general consensus amongst everybody to save this thing. I'm not saying no to that, but I didn't think that we would come up with any hard and recommendations that really have, before we come in front of the commission, that we have vetted all of these. To your point, Scott, to put that money there, we haven't made that final decision of whether we're going to save the building or we're going to remove it. I mean, I know the prevailing feeling is to save the building, and I'm not opposed. I have my own very strong feelings about that old building. So, but I'd rather us do the due diligence, take our time, rather than trying to rush this thing and make some premature judgments. I would rather go with John, talk to ARC Inc., find out what it is for a timeline, get back to you, all of you, and then we can have some hard numbers, and then we can move on. And to your point, Scott, about putting money in that, if we found out that that was an overwhelming idea that we wanted to save it, and then we wanted to put money into John's budget to do a structural fix on the to begin there, we could do that. We can put that in an, you know, we have some money set aside in our budget that could accommodate that, perhaps, providing you get 3 votes to do it, so.
Well, the one thing that bothers me more than anything is when I walk around that building is that the water runs towards the building. And in this 2020 estimate, it was $10,000 to get that water to run away from the building. If we don't get the water away from the building, there's no sense in going any further, because it's gonna destroy that foundation. I mean, I think that's something that needs to be pursued. And however that gets done, I'd like to see it done. That's a bare minimum. I mean, because you rot the foundation out, you can't save the rest of it.
Well, Scott, I'm not arguing again, but I mean, I don't know that foundation is going to be totally destroyed if we wait another month or 6 weeks to make that final decision. And if we make that final decision, and if it is to revitalize and rehab that, then that becomes a priority to take care of all that kind of leakage that you see in this book here about where water is compromising the foundation, so.
So in the event that the decision is made to tear down, how long would it take to vacate that building? For everyone to be out of it?
Well, they'll be out just as soon as, we open the new Justice Center.
And how long is that?
September of
26, isn't it,
26.
year, end of 26?
Yeah, September
Yeah.
26th.
With the exception of some storage items that are in the basement, I'm not sure what we do with all that yet. We're working internally with our department heads to say what needs to be scanned, what can we do? We have to have another option if this goes away, but that's still kind of in its infancy of
So-
discussion.
Barring no repairs, none at this time, we could make do until 2026.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, I'm just curious, so,
Yep.
I mean, like, if we say we're not going to level any dirt, we're not going to fix any drainage, we're not gonna do anything, we're gonna sit idle until we have some numbers, we could make it until we can decide one way or the other, right?
Well, Chris, what I would say is this: if we come back and we find that the numbers are not that high to revamp the old building, okay, and then it is a consensus of this group to come in front of the commission and recommend that we take that old building and we spend the money to rehab it, okay? That can be done, we should have this thing done by this fall about what the commission is going to do, and then we have to figure out how we're going to pay for it.
And I did some fast math. I mean,
Yeah.
at 14,000 square feet usable,
Yeah.
and if we paid $658 a square foot in that Justice Center, you're roughly at $9.2 million. This, I understand, is 5 years old, but it's not $9.2 million. I don't even think 5 years of inflation will get me to $9.2 million, and I could be way wrong. However, I would be hard pressed to see what that new number is. And I get apples to apples. I know what you're saying. But I'm also kind of disappointed that in 5 years we've done nothing. Why wouldn't we have done the bare minimum even? The drainage, let's bring in some dirt, slope it away from the building. Whatever that looks like, caulk some windows. I get it, caulk some windows. And I know you've done some. I'm not saying that we haven't done anything. But there's some things in here I think we could have done the lesser of evils to maybe try to just mitigate some issues.
A year ago next week, we got 21 inches of rain. And 11 years ago next week, we got 16 inches of rain. And a history professor taught me that those that do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it.
Yep.
And I don't want to be sitting on a board. So in regards to what Scott says, I don't want to be sitting here saying, coulda, shoulda, woulda, we were waiting on this, we were waiting on that. And old Brian Karstens tells us we got rain coming.
Let's hope so.
I'm just a bearer of bad news. I'm just saying, I don't want to be stuck here. Well, you were sitting on that board and you guys never made a decision.
Unknown caller.
You should silence that. There you go.
God, I tell you.
You're a busy man over there.
Chris,
You
those
should
are,
run a
High
business.
demand.
Chris, those are two 100-year events within 10 years,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah. Have lots of them.
Just to give some insight into the timing of this, I think one of the reasons we had such an aggressive schedule was the attempt to try to get these things flushed out, getting consensus from the public. I mean, look, I'll give you a cautionary tale about consensus from the public. I'm not knocking the city of Mitchell, but they came in very hard wanting a prison, and now they found out the hard way what happens when you don't take the time to build public
temperature.
consensus.
Of the
And
public.
even look at the Prison Reset Committee. They didn't have consensus among legislators because they got to get a 2/3 vote. So they're having to go through the very, hard, detailed process of what makes local government work, which is having meetings like these where folks do sharpshoot us, and I welcome that. I don't have any offense to none of that at all. But you got to go through the hard, painful process of having people pick you apart, give their point of view, because you got to be able to create ideas and solutions that sometimes the folks who are elected don't have, or aren't thinking of, or they have blind spots too. And we need to hear from, that's why hearing from the public is very important, because we have to drive consensus. And look, maybe even the people in this room tonight may not be reflecting what the public wants, even though we've invited the public to come here. And so that's what we're trying to get towards, because obviously we'd like to create a budgetary situation, or I'll speak for myself, I would like to, in order to attempt, I didn't say it's going to be possible, but just attempt to create a phased approach if we do that in order to avoid an opt-out scenario. So that's why I'm kind of for a phased approach. It's not a Band-Aid approach. It's for a phased approach where we paint the first year, put the new roof on the second year, and remodel the kitchen the third year, just like you do in your own home budget. And so I kind of see the same thing happening here. But Scott, I'm picking up what you're laying down, as well as the rest of the members, is there are things that we could do that we're not doing right now that frankly, because you're taking the consensus that you hear from this committee tonight and you're saying, you got to run with it. Got to fix that exterior of the building. It's low-hanging fruit, isn't it? So, again, to circle back to why we had such an aggressive schedule, it was to get into this year's budget cycle for next year.
Yeah, so just following up on that, some dates for the budget cycle. The adoption of the provisional budget is July 22nd. That's the initial budget that is kind of decided. So the auditor has presented the budget on June 3rd. Now, going through the next couple weeks, we're having departments come through and talk about the budget. And then on July 22nd, the board adopts what's called the provisional budget. That gets published, and there's a notification that we'll be holding a budget hearing on September 9th, the first Tuesday in September. Mm-hmm. So then everyone has all that time to review that provisional budget, and any changes made to that provisional budget in between then and September 9th need to be done by motion and published in the paper for public review. And then there's another public hearing on September 9th with the final date that the 2026 budget can be adopted no later than October 1st. So it's September 30th. So that puts the last date, the last scheduled commission meeting for September 23rd, that the budget can be adopted. And now it can be changed before that, but it's got to be published and then approved again post changes.
That's why we started in June.
Yeah. So it's not, I guess my point is that it's not something that has to be solved by the end of June. I mean, you obviously want all this information as much as possible, but the provisional budget is for anything for next year, provisional budget July 22nd, final budget September 23rd.
You know, just for clarity purposes, why this group is meeting here is it became evident that we were talking about the fact that we were moving into this new Justice Center, and there hadn't been any conversation at all about what we were going to do with the old building. So that's when, I think at a meeting, I made a motion that Commissioner Aaron's and I start this task force to look at this thing, so we got some lead time here in June and July so that we can make a recommendation and come back and get that as Joel has said, in this year's budget, so.
I think it's important that you communicate with the judges and people in our judicial, that the conversations we've had and the meetings that we've had, so that they are abreast on this as well. We don't want to have any surprises for them.
Like they do for us. Is there any other comments? I think, Scott, we will take a look at that. I mean, we could look at some priorities that maybe a minimum amount of maintenance that can rectify this, within the next 30 days. But I'm more optimistic. I want to get some numbers and get this final decision made here sometime in July so that by the 1st of August, we have this thing, recommendation in front of the commission. If that's okay with everybody, we'll communicate with you. We'll tell you what numbers that we get after talking to Arc Inc. and whoever else we have to talk to. Maybe we got to get Sukup. Who else? Who tore down the old jail? Who company was that?
Spielman.
Steelman?
Spielman.
Is he still in business after banging on that jail for forever?
Jim, I got a couple
Yeah,
points
you bet,
to
Kevin.
point out maybe here. If the committee decides to go ahead with the remodel, is there grants available? Possibly. Has anybody reached out to the National Historic Society? Can they help if we
It's
do
not
a
on- It
museum?
can't be the historical register. It's
Okay.
been remodeled too many times to qualify.
Okay.
We checked that out.
Another thing that I want to bring to light is somebody mentioned renting space to the city of Canton. I'm just going to bring to light here that I sit on the city council of Harrisburg, and I want to say this right. So if you've got one tax entity leasing to another tax entity, where this one's already paid for by the taxpayers, I don't know if that's correct, because the taxpayer's already paying for this. So why should they lease it? Does that make sense?
It does, and I can answer that. I believe that this was fixed under state law, from a legal perspective. I'm not coming at it from a philosophical one. But for example, you've got like the state who built these, National Guard armories, in these different communities. And then what they ended up doing is they ended up partnering with the local community, I think like down in Vermillion, up in Flandreau and some other places. And what they settled on is that it was permissible from a legal perspective, I'm not talking philosophical, to allow one entity to rent to another.
Kevin, my apologies. Kevin, do you want to introduce yourself? I have neglected that. No, it's a,
Kevin Larson, I live in Harrisburg, and Jim had contacted me to join the committee at the beginning, and last week I was unable to make it due to conflicting meetings.
The one other thing I want to add to that, Kevin, is cities are allowed to collect sales tax, and the county is not. And so here in South Dakota, cities do have the power to collect more revenue than what the county does. But I don't want it to look like I'm defending the position one way or another. So I do think we need to bring that to the commission as a whole, whether, whether folks think they're getting double taxed on a deal like that. So I'm writing it down.
Thanks, Joel. I just looking at it from a taxpayer point of view, if you're getting double dipped on.
is there anything else that needs to be talked about? Until that time, we will suspend this thing until you get further notice and we get some more information, and we'll reconvene, and then we'll start with hard numbers and
So
get
does
some
that mean
decision
no meeting the next week for sure, and
Next
probably 2 weeks at
maybe
least?
2 weeks before we get back together.
So I had sent you all an initial schedule. I'll send another email so everyone knows, and then just update that. We'll reschedule when we have a few more numbers, or if something else changes in the meantime. So
And since we are canceling next week's meeting,
Yep.
I'm just going to take this opportunity, since the public is viewing this. There is a safety action team open house at the courthouse next Tuesday night, 5 PM to 6:30 PM. And the safety action team, for which I also sit on, are going to be here, and that has to deal with safety, making Lincoln County roads safer.
Good.
So that's open to the public as well. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Jason, you mentioned you